Welcome to my messy studio, everyone. My name is Mark, and I'm an artist and an art professor. And in this video, we're going to talk about a simple mixed media technique that was used by the French Baroque painter Claude Lorrain to create wonderfully subtle and expressive drawings. Using only black, brown, and white ink, and warm-colored toned paper, we can create work that looks like it was done in full color. We're going to examine a number of drawings by Lorrain to see if we can arrive at how he used this technique, and then I'll show you what I think is the most effective way of using it. Let's get started. But before we begin, I'd like to let you know about my channel membership program. For a small monthly subscription, members can access 2 full-length tutorials per month and other exclusive content, and get priority to have their art-related questions answered. Not only is this a great way to support my channel, it allows me to make long-form content for a small group of interested people without the pressure of having to make videos that appeal to the algorithm. Okay, back to the regularly scheduled programming. Claude Lorrain was born in 1600 in what is now northeastern France, but spent most of his life in Italy. Known primarily for landscape, his serene, classically inspired depictions of the Italian countryside are bathed in a languid, romantic glow, yet are underpinned by a rigorously designed compositional structure. Drawing was an important facet of his practice, and he produced a large number of works on paper in the form of sketches, preparatory studies, and finished works in their own right, drawings that, to my mind, are often more interesting than his large-scale oil paintings. While he worked in a variety of dry and wet media, the drawings that concern us today are done on toned paper and use 3 colors of inks: black, brown, and white. In this masterful drawing, Lorrain fully exploits this technique's unique ability to evoke the impression of more colors than are actually there. The foreground, treated more or less transparently with washes of brown and black, glows with the warm brown color of the toned paper underneath, creating an organic feeling of color complexity, whereas the semi-transparent gray washes in the middle ground create an atmospheric receding coolness. And the almost opaque gray of the ocean and sky in the background are so cool that against the warm color of the brown paper, they read as blue. And though no green is used anywhere in this drawing, the leaves in the trees somehow feel like they have a touch of green in them, a testament to this technique's power of suggestion. While Lorrain used this technique with a variety of paper colors, each creating a distinct effect, for this tutorial I'll be using a brown paper because it's what he most commonly used and will give us the fullest range of color evoking potential. Because this is the secret of this technique. Despite only using black, brown, and white, a huge range of colors can be created by exploiting not only how those colors are mixed, but also how they're applied. For this technique, you will need 3 waterproof drawing inks: a black, a brown, and a white. The exact color of the brown is not so important, but try to choose one that has a rich brown color as opposed to something that is more neutral and grayish brown. I'm using inks made by Higgins and working over a sketchbook filled with light brown watercolor paper made by Hahnemulle. The first 3 colors are obvious. We have black, brown, and white. But let's not forget that when working on toned paper, that adds a 4th color to the equation. And when your 3 ink colors are diluted, making them more transparent, you get what's called an optical mixture, an effect that occurs when paint is put down in multiple transparent or translucent layers. Since optical mixing is the result of light passing through the paint layers and then reflecting back, colors mixed this way look different than colors that are mixed physically. That is to say, colors that are formed by the actual mixing of coloring agents. So, when the colors are applied transparently over toned paper, they create additional color through optical mixing. And of course, we can always create even more color by mixing the inks together physically. But then the plot thickens, because these mixed colors can also be diluted, optically mixing with the ground color to create additional color variation. Working with waterproof ink gives us even greater color range. For example, we can put down a layer of white ink, let it dry, and apply a darker layer over it. Or conversely, put down a layer of black or dark brown ink and put a lighter layer over it, creating additional optical mixtures. If that wasn't enough, there are two additional factors we have to consider. The first is the cooling effect, which occurs when white is applied semi-transparently over a darker color. This can create colors that can push us past gray and actually create something that starts approximating blue. This effect is strengthened by the warm brown color of the paper, which makes the grays mixed up this way appear even more blue. This trick was well known to the old masters, who often used it to get cooler colors instead of the more expensive blue pigments, understanding that unless you needed a strong saturated blue, a semi-transparent gray painted over a ground color can be blue enough. So as you can see, even with a severely restricted palette, the range of color variety is actually quite great. And that's the secret with working in a limited palette, to try to achieve the largest variety of color within that limited range. Now let me show you how to apply this way of working to an actual drawing. This method can be done in a lot of different ways, depending on lots of factors, including the subject matter. But as with any method where there are a lot of moving parts, you have to be systematic and break the process down into logical steps. And here is the order which I find gives the best results. The first step is to start with brown ink for your line work. Of course, you have the option of working only with a brush, foregoing the pen entirely, but I enjoy the combination of pen and watercolor, and since this is what Lorraine uses, that's what I'm going with. The system I'm using is based on three principles of atmospheric perspective. The first is that full contrast advances and limited contrast recedes, meaning that areas with a strong range of lights and darks look close, whereas areas with lighter darks look farther away. The second rule is that warm colors advance and cool colors recede. For those not familiar with the terms warm and cool, warm colors are closer to orange, whereas cooler colors are closer to blue. This means that things with more blue in them will generally appear farther away than things that are more orange. And the third principle is that strong saturation advances, while weak saturation recedes. This means that more saturated colors will look closer, and less saturated color will look farther away. I will, as much as possible, explain everything I'm doing along the way, but as you're watching this, keep those three principles in mind, since much of my decision-making process is governed by them. I'm using a Hunt Globe 513 EF nib, one that after some years of use has worn down and is probably not as fine as it was when new. That's the way it is with untipped dip nibs, and pen and ink artists, before the days of having access to every possible kind of nib size, would hold onto their old steel nibs with worn down tips for situations where a wider line was needed. This nib is flexible, allowing me to create line variation with pressure, and I'm taking as much advantage of it as possible, making sure to place thicker lines in areas that are closer. I'm also making those lines more continuous, whereas the lines I put down for areas in the distance are more broken. This simple formula, thicker, more continuous lines where things are close, and thinner, more dash-like, broken lines in things that are farther away, is basically all I'm concerning myself with at the moment. In a complex process like this, the key is to compartmentalize. Breaking things down into steps allows me to focus entirely on each task separately, making it more manageable. Of course, anticipating the next step is important, and this is something that can be done as you become acquainted with the ins and outs of this technique. The line work is slightly thicker and bolder than it would be if I was working with pen and ink alone. But because I'll be going over the lines with layers of semi-transparent ink, I don't have to worry about them being too harsh since I can always make them softer. This is something to remember with these seemingly complicated multi-step techniques. The more steps there are, the more opportunities are created to right the ship, and therefore more room for error. In this respect, a drawing done solely with a pen is absolutely the hardest thing to do. Now that I've completed my line work, I'm ready for step number 2, which is to switch to the brush and render everything with transparent brown washes. As with any technique, there is room for variation, and I suppose I could have, following the principles of atmospheric perspective, also used black wash to make the background areas cooler. I chose not to for two reasons. The first is that working in monochrome first separates the problem of value and color, making the crucial step of getting the values right easier. This is something that was frequently done by the old masters, who would first create a monochrome underpainting, sometimes called the dead layer, before applying color over it with transparent and semi-transparent paint. The second reason is also why I chose to use brown ink and not black. Working in brown first will make the overall image warmer and make the cooler semi-transparent washes I put down in the next stage that much more impactful. Now that we've completed the drawing with a brown wash, on to the next step, which is to heighten the drawing with white. This step is essentially a continuation of the monochrome stage, and all I'm doing here is expanding the range of contrast in the drawing without really dealing with color. The key here is to work semi-transparently, allowing the values to build up gradually. This is not such a difficult direction to follow, since most white inks are not particularly opaque. So, to get a full range of contrast, you need to put down a layer, wait for it to dry, before putting down additional layers of white. The white layer in this case serves not only to add lighter values, but also to soften the line work and darker values in the middle ground and background. It also, when applied semi-transparently, cools down the brown color underneath, making it particularly useful in those distant background areas. The drawing at this stage could actually be considered complete if we wanted a quick sketch in brown ink and white heightening. But we're nowhere near being done, because here is where the real trickery begins, because now I'm going to start adding color. Well, not color exactly, but rather washes of semi-transparent gray. In this stage, I start working to cool down the colors where needed. Since the color in the background is generally cooler, the washes you lay down there should be lighter, grayer, and more opaque, whereas the washes in the foreground, where the colors generally need to be warmer, should be darker and more transparent. And since the sky is the coolest color in the composition, that's where I'm going to have the grayest, most opaque colors. It's always a good idea to early on establish where your coolest colors are going to be in the picture, as well as where the warmest colors are going to be. This will allow you to better gauge where the other colors lie in the continuum in between. Another important bit of advice when working in such a restricted palette is not to focus on the actual color that you're seeing in the reference, but instead think about its relative warmness or coolness. I should point out that I'm also doing quite a bit of exaggeration, especially in foreground areas. Since there's very little in the foreground in terms of texture and detail that I can emphasize with line to get a strong sense of closeness, I turn to color to help me with that task. Leaving the color here very warm and transparent serves to make this area advance. But I'm also adding busier brushwork here in order to push that area even closer. But I'm also going to use the third principle of atmospheric perspective, which is that saturated color advances. How do I get saturated color when I don't have access to it? Well, if I place touches of opaque gray in the foreground, they will appear as blue. Not exactly saturated blue, but saturated enough that they pop forward. Once my grays have been put in, it's time to get as much color variation out of this severely limited palette. I had washes of semi-transparent brown and white in places, or mixtures of white, brown, and black, or even revert back to full transparency. Essentially, at this stage, I pull out all the stops and use all of the color-making methods demonstrated at the beginning of this tutorial. Besides being a fun technique, which, because of the extremely limited materials required, is highly portable, this is also a very valuable tool in learning how to work with warm and cool colors, how to deal with a severely limited palette, and also how to mix colors optically rather than physically using transparent and semi-transparent washes of color. As such, it'll be of particular use to painters. Here's the final sketch, which hopefully serves as proof of concept. By the way, for those interested in seeing this process in real time and not sped up, I'm going to upload a narration-free, real-time demonstration of this entire process for my channel members. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and if you did, please subscribe, or better yet, become a channel member. Thanks so much for watching, and see you back in my messy studio very soon. Bye for now.